Okay, so hello and welcome to another episode of Grief Unedited. This is a space where we have real, honest, and raw conversations about grief and loss. I'm your host, Karen Lafferty, and I'm an accredited counsellor and supervisor specialising in grief. And I've worked with individuals and families for over a decade now, helping them to navigate their journey of loss. If you do want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, and both of those are at Continuum Counselling, or also my website is www.continuumcounselling.com. This podcast is purely just for educational purposes, so please be aware that any views that are expressed within it are my own. They're not representative of any of the third parties that I work alongside or on behalf of. And lastly, I always give each episode just a little content warning. As I say, these conversations are real, they are unedited, and we know that grief can be overwhelming at times. So please do use your discretion when you're listening. And if any of today's conversation feels difficult or triggering in any sort of way for you, please feel free to step away and do something to look after yourself. Now, I am really excited for today's episode. I feel like I start every podcast episode by saying that, but I genuinely am really excited for each of the conversations I've had, but more so for today's episode with the lovely Stacey because we met way back in 2019 when we first did our meditation teacher training together. So, yeah, I feel like I've known you in lots of ways, but I'm really looking forward to having this conversation and hearing a bit of the background that's obviously brought you into this topic. So, just to introduce our topic for today, the episode is called Invisible Wounds Navigating Estrangement and Unacknowledged Grief. So, is it all right, Stacey, if you just introduce yourself, I suppose, and tell us a wee bit about yourself before we dive into the topic for today?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, hello. I'm
Hello.
Stacey. I'm the superpower coach, so I also have run my own business as a self-awareness specialist. So I qualified in transformational life coaching in 2020, when everything was going crazy. I'm mum to a 4-year-old beautiful daughter, and yeah, today I am so grateful for having this opportunity to talk to Karen about something that I haven't shared with anyone, and I suppose it's a bit weird that I'm doing it,
Mm.
obviously, with an audience. But I feel like you've created such a safe and healing space, and like you said, we've known each other in I suppose, in a transformational capacity for the
Mm.
last couple of years. So I do feel like, um, yeah, it's a really important part of my journey in self-development that I have this conversation, and I thought, you know what, I need a deadline and I need someone to talk to about it. So yeah, when you shared about your themes for this podcast, I thought, you know what, this would be the perfect opportunity.
Mm.
Um, so just a little bit of background. I went no contact from my whole family, my immediate family, in 2019, so August 2019. Um, yeah, and so I just started the meditation course after it, probably looking for a little peace and calm to my busy mind about all that stuff going on inside it. But it was the catalyst of something. Obviously, it wasn't just one big argument. It was the catalyst of, a good couple of years consistently. The relationship being, chipped away, and essentially it came to a head um, at the end of that year. Um, it was on their side, to be honest. It was like, I've got it's my mum, dad, two sisters. It was on their side, but then through sort of looking into like what I wanted my life to look like
Mm.
and looking at the situation and everything. Throughout 2020, I think 2020 was just such a, oh my God, it was such a crazy transformational year for me and so many people. I was also pregnant at that time, so I got pregnant in.
Yeah.
I was also processing, obviously, the estrangement at that point of from my family. Had this really happy time and amongst all this craziness. So yeah, that is basically the gist of it. And then decided, did a lot of development work, inner work, mindset work, and in the August of that year, decided to go no contact. I let them know that I would not be, because I've been trying to keep in touch and trying to scrabble any little bit of contact or repair whatever we could on my side. But yeah, it got to the point where priorities changed, and in August of 2020, I decided that I would not be communicating any longer with them. And yeah, since then, so we're about 5 years now. I've been no contact with my family. Yeah.
And see the idea of no contact, do you remember or can you recall how that first became something you started thinking about or started kind of moving towards?
Yeah. God, yeah, it was a long journey because I did not want to go no contact. I wanted to try and repair the relationship. When they first said that they were taking a step back from me, like I felt like I was dying. I felt like it was a very physical reaction. And it was like something I just could not compute. Like we were family and
Yeah.
I'd also decided, like, although I wasn't pregnant at this time, I was trying, and I'd made that, we did, like any family, you've got your ups and downs and, arguments and all that and certain things. But I remember deciding in my head, like, I wanted her to have both sets of family. Like, I wanted her to grow up with, know both grandparents and everything. So I remember making this like inner promise to myself, like no matter what happened, I would I would fix it. I would make it work. Like I would do anything to keep them in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of no contact was really at that point it felt like a really far off concept. But I suppose through trying to reinstate contact, like, sending birthday cards, sending messages. It was not hearing anything back, not like no effort, no time, no energy on one side. And it gets to that point, Karen, where you're like, oh my God, I can't do all this on my own. Like
Yeah.
I'm not like relationships it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
If you're not getting anything back, and then obviously I did get pregnant, so I think I had to have that real conversation with myself, like, where am I going to prioritize and focus this energy and effort? I was putting it all towards these adults, this adult family that I had who, you, had wanted to take a step back. But then I'm in this situation where I've got this new baby
Mm.
growing, coming into the world, and she needs me.
Yeah.
Um, so it got to the point where that's a really good question actually, because I think it was a very gradual. I think it was a case of a transference of focus and energy, because they had been my world and we were very close, like a very close knit family. Um, I think it was the transferring the energy that was putting all into them and then just putting it into her and realizing like just having a think about like what's good for her. And again, I
Yeah.
suppose it's not really healthy, and I've thought about that before as well. Like I was such a people pleaser. I was a total Now I know that I was a total codependent. Like other people's actions determined how I would feel. So I'm conscious, like I was transferring that to her. Like, what does she need? What's going to be good for her? Just trying to prioritize the good for her. But I suppose in that sense, I needed to take that focus because I couldn't do it for myself. But I could do it for her.
You could do
And
it for her.
yeah, and I suppose the no contact, if she hadn't came on the scene, I would probably have still tried
Mm.
to to build that relationship. But I think because I had to look after myself and her, and I knew like that wasn't a healthy situation to be in. And I knew that the no contact, I suppose, came up because I didn't want them to treat her the way they treated me. She deserved better. And I felt like, I was 39, 40 that year. So I did 40 years of them showing me who they were and showing me what they thought of our relationship. And, and it wasn't, I decided that I deserved better and that she deserved better. And I felt like no contact was, because otherwise you've got little bits of energy. I'm very big on energy. You might have noticed. I mentioned it already 20 times. But it's that whole, when people come into your energy, your space, and I'm very empathic as well. So I do take on energy. So I was very conscious of like just little drips of bad negative
Mm.
coming in or whatever. And I was like, do you know what? I just knew having a kid was going to take up a lot of time and energy. And I'm like, I don't have that to spare anymore. Anyway, long story short.
I love
Yeah.
that idea though of like almost like in the early days, the first thing was like actually if I can't do this for me, I can do it for her. And then
Mhm.
gradually it kind of became about recognizing more of like, no, actually I deserve better, I can deserve this for me rather than it just having to be about your daughter. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And when you put that call out of like, right, no contact, what were the first
Mhm.
kind of couple of days and weeks like? How did you navigate that? Because it feels like that must have been quite a big decision to make and to actually then like communicate it as
Yeah.
well.
Oh, I felt sick. So what I did was I sent a physical letter to everybody, and I told my partner that I was doing it, because it was a bit. I felt guilty because there was, when I was trying to garner support from the people around me, like a partner, friends, and family. They've not experienced it, so they were sort of like in the headspace of, oh well, kids, things change after kids.
Right.
They might, treating like kids as a bridge sort of thing. Like they connect families and they mend families and all this. And it was just like I could feel that in my body as well. Like, no, like that's not her job to fix or be the glue or all this. It's like, no. So I suppose that really, I felt sick and guilty, but I feel like hearing other people's, you know, proposed outcomes or, oh, you never know, they might get in touch or even when I'd made that decision, it was like, nope, there's no contact. There was still this element of, oh, it might work itself out or they might come
Mm.
round. And it was like, but I remember the physical feeling in my body, like, no, I don't want that. And I'm very malleable. Like before then, like I said, I was a total people pleaser. It's like, if you want to come and see her, like I would have let you. But in the days after that, making that decision, I think was so important for my mindset and my just not everything like belief system in myself and self-belief, self-worth, belief system, values. Like it had a knock-on effect on everything because it was such a big action, I suppose. But
Yeah.
yeah, I did feel, oh God, I remember, yeah, God, if I'm honest, I did feel like I don't know if it was the hormones but I got really fearful. I got really
Hmm.
fearful of their reaction,
Hmm.
um, and I started like visualizing, possible outcomes like them turning up unannounced, them being really angry, them, using Maisie against me. Oh, it was just like I did spiral a little bit, if I'm honest. Um, but again, having a supportive partner was like a lifesaver because
Mm.
I spoke to him about it. I was like, I'm having these crazy thoughts. And he was like, he didn't disregard them. He was just like, but do you know what? Like, even if the worst happens, we've got like a support in place or da da da. And do you know what? Nothing happened. Nothing happened. I don't even, well, I do know they got the letters, but, um, you know, didn't hear from them. Like they totally respected the request in the letter, the no contact request. So I suppose, like, you know, yeah, it must have been like something they wanted as well. And yeah, so the few days after it were pretty, yeah, were pretty roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that just as you're kind of setting the scene of what you were navigating at that time, Stacey, it's something that I suppose it strikes me that often people have really fractious and really difficult relationships with their families, and there seems to be that mentality of like, well, we just need to go on with it. They're my family, do you know? And it's like, actually, you don't. You know, as you say, you had 40 years of trying and seeing what that relationship was like, and eventually that self-preservation bit, I think, comes in and goes, no, actually, like, how many more times are we doing this same dance and nothing changing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mm,
totally. And I
yeah.
think that's the tricky bit as well. Like that's just you see so many. I don't think we talk about this enough because we've just had Christmas there, and Christmas isn't a happy time for everyone because of all these different family dynamics and that. But that's all you see,
Yeah.
like families out together, and society just paints this picture that like you're saying, blood stick in the water. You stick
Yep.
with them. You and all that. And yeah, I think sometimes you do have to look after yourself
At what point in your journey did that kind of grief word come into your awareness? At what point did it kind of
early,
resonate as being right early on?
early bells, early, because I feel like I don't know if it was their tone or their language or because it was sort of so my family dynamic was although I'm not in touch with the four of them, there was very much a spokesperson.
Okay.
And I think because it was filtered through that one person and it was
Mm,
and it felt very much like I don't know, I knew there was no coming back from it. Um, and that's the thing, like I felt like I was dying. And I don't know if that's because it's like that the family connection or the um or there was something innate, like I just knew there was no going back. And I suppose even though I tried like little bits at that point, it was like for the next year, I thought, oh, maybe, um, yeah, but the grief kicked in really early. To be fair though, the grief kicked in early, but there was also a sense of relief. So
mm,
it was weird. It was sadness with a lightness,
yeah.
like a lighter.
Hmm.
I felt I didn't realize, but I'd always carried this like heaviness and weight in my stomach. And I remember like going to work and just not having that knot in my stomach anymore. Like, so it was weird. So again, I suppose that's where the guilt comes from because you've got this grief at this brokenness and this disconnection, but it's like, oh, but I don't have to, put all this energy in, be someone I'm not, try so hard, all those things that went with it. Like it was all that energy. And looking back, like I got pregnant 6 months later, and I feel like that definitely created space for
Mm,
me to come in if you know what I'm saying, like
mhm.
created space in that because yeah, I don't believe if that hadn't happened, I don't believe she would be here.
It's you said something really interesting there, Stacey, that I suppose kind of contradicts what you might expect to happen and what I often find myself talking about, in that generally speaking, when we're talking about like non-death losses, the distinction between like a death type of loss and a non-death loss would be that with death there's no hope of restoration, but in pretty much every other situation that we encounter, even if we feel grief, there's still that slight glimmer of hope of like we might restore it, it might come back good. But it strikes me like as you were describing like your mindset, it's almost like you were so and are so certain that it's just you were at the end of that road, that there never was a restoration once that letter was sent, once that communication had happened.
Yeah, it
Mm.
felt very absolute. Yeah, and I think, you just get to that point where you're like, enough is enough.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know and I suppose, do you know what? And I've thought a lot about, and God, in that year after it, I got obsessed with, emotional literacy, like naming your feelings and
Mm.
family dynamics and personality types. And I just wanted to understand. I was so obsessed with like, why has this happened? And like, what is it that's ha- happened in our family? Like, what is it? Is it just me? I suppose it was like I was trying to figure out another answer that I wasn't the common factor.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like so I got really, but it was so interesting. Like I learned so much about empaths, narcissists, codependents, people pleasing, stuff I hadn't. I was like, we're not taught this, and
No.
we don't, we don't know what we don't know. We just think that this is who we are, and especially in family dynamics, it's like it depends on your role in the family. If you're the oldest, you're popped in this box of being responsible and being the second mum and looking after XYZ, and it's I think all that has um a affects it as well. So yeah, it was like just trying to figure out the different types of like family dynamics and how that all runs down, and learnt terms like enmeshment, like
Mm.
that unhealthy type of close knitness. So yeah, it was a really interesting time, which like helped me like figure out a lot of stuff. Um, but then I just get at one point again, and it was very gradual, but I feel like at one point it switched, and I was like, you know, it turned into a real journey of like self-discovery. Like, what is it I need today? Like, even just asking myself that question, I'd never bothered before. It was always about what other people needed and being there for them, and um just figuring out like who I am. Because if you've also been told like, oh, you're too sensitive, or
Mm.
too much to this, when you're told that, you start to see yourself like that. So when that's taken away, you sort of have to, I don't know, I suppose the grief was like, who the fuck am I if I'm not a part of this group,
Yep.
this my family. Um, so I remember like, oh, I mean, I love the personality quiz anyway, but it was like, right, just really, really, again, obsessed about like figuring out like who I am, and I got really into human design, and that was just an eye opener for me, because there's that element of it where you're given a profile, like there's 12 profiles, but there was the profile I have is like it lives in the projection field. So you're constantly projected on. And I was sort of like, I don't really understand what that means, but it was like you're constantly at the beck and call of the opinions of others.
Ah,
Like they
okay.
will constantly like want you to act how they want you to act. But
Hmm.
we're humans. It's like I've got my own wants and needs and dreams and goals. Like, you're projecting this on me. That's I can't mirror that back. And that for me was a relief, because I was like,
Mm.
this has absolutely nothing to do with me. This is like their what they want, how they want to see me, and how they want me to be.
Hmm.
But in families, you've got to have that give and take. It's like, yeah, you might want me to be like that, but at the end of the day, it's your life. You've got to live it on your own, on your own terms, because at the end of the day, it's you. I always think about like sitting in the room. It's like a breakup, when all your friends might hate the guy you're seeing, and tell you to dump him and whatever. At the end of the day, when you're not with him anymore, it's you sitting without him. It's you in your room, and I feel like, do you know that way? If it's just you and your job, you and your family, you and your partner. It's you and your decisions. So see, when you like go to sleep at night, you've got to be at peace with yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it for anyone else, it's like, oh my God, the turmoil and the dissatisfaction is just crazy. So projections was just, oh my God, a game changer for me.
Mm.
And I suppose on a simple level, it was sort of like, it's just their opinion, and
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. But at the end of the day, I can also take it or leave it. I
Yeah.
think the opinions were and in my family, it was very much like, black or white. No, I think you should do this. And it's like, but they expect it to be done. And
Mm-hmm.
it was like, there was no room for, um, I want to say free will, but not that. But do you know what I mean? Like, there was
Mm-hmm.
no,
Mm-hmm.
it was like, go and follow your dreams as long as they're in line with how we see it fitting into the family and if it benefits us, and very much an
Yeah.
extension of them. So it was a real like, oh my God, human design and like figuring out how I move through the world and how the world reacts to me
Mm-hmm.
was a changer, and a really, really important part of figuring out who I am and my identity and reclaiming that, I suppose.
Yeah. I think sometimes people don't always recognise I suppose the identity part as being part of a grief journey as well, because part of our job when we're navigating a loss is to kind of reorganise ourselves into the world without that person or those people in it, do you know? So that identity piece of like, who am I when I'm not in relation to that person is a big part of a grief journey to, get back to some semblance of normality. And I hate the word normal because I don't ever know what normal really actually is, but it's like for us to get back into some sort of functional space where life is happening
Absolutely.
again, we're participating in our world, we're thriving in parts of our world as well. But it's like having to do that bit of work that you've just described beautifully there of like, who am I and what matters to me and what are the things that, actually define me as me and not in that context of other people and their opinions of me.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's the goal though, isn't it? And again, it's just it's giving yourself that time. I mean, I'm the worst one. Like, I want all the info and I want to have the light bulb moments right then. But oh my God, the best, the best thing I've done is just let it sit and give it time, because, like you're saying, that's when you really learn about what you need.
Yeah. I want to also, I suppose, acknowledge the language of like disenfranchised grief. And I know we've kind of
Mhm.
touched on this before we kind of come on today,
Mhm.
but I suppose what we're describing in your journey, Stacey, is that type of loss that society doesn't necessarily recognise it as being a loss as such. I don't imagine you got bouquets of flowers or cards for your pals or, people checking in to see if you were doing all right at the time, the things that
Yeah.
people normally do when we experience a loss. And that's what a disenfranchised loss is, it's those types of loss. And I'm thinking of other examples. So sometimes, like, if people experience things like maybe like early miscarriage, for instance, the world around them maybe doesn't know that they were pregnant, so people don't necessarily know that they've experienced a loss. Or, for you, there wasn't a funeral, there wasn't the big ending thing of, it
Mm.
was a letter, it was your own resolve of like, no, actually, I'm done with this. That was the thing that, brought about that ending. So. I suppose I wanted to just put that out there as a means to give people a wee bit of language as to why that type of loss probably feels quite different to, death losses, other losses that feel significant in somebody's world. It's like if it's
Mhm.
not witnessed by other people, if you're, the people that support you, if they're not in that space of recognizing it as a loss, then it could potentially be quite isolating.
Yeah, and yeah, that was the first time I'd actually heard about the term disenfranchised grief when we spoke about it, but it made me think as well, and I was like, yeah, because I suppose it's as if you've chosen that grief, but it
Mm,
wasn't really a choice because it was sort of taken out of my hands because of
yeah.
X, Y, Z. But and I suppose the other examples that you mentioned as well, it's like, yeah, there's no choice there, and um it doesn't take away from any of the feelings that you're feeling. Yeah, it's so tricky.
Yeah.
It's like, God, is there a right way to do anything? Society, like, there's the right way to, be a woman, or there's a right way to be sad. And it's like,
Mm,
really? Like,
yeah.
there's not. It's just whatever you need, I suppose. It's that whole person. It's so personal.
Yeah. And it sounds like because you had your husband alongside you like to witness it with you, to talk it through, to help you make sense of it, it's like at least there's at least one other human being in this earth that knows exactly what you're going through, that gives maybe just that bit of insight sometimes, a wee bit of moral support when you need that
Yeah,
space as well, that I can imagine makes a big difference.
it was massive. It was massive difference. Yeah, and I suppose I was super lucky to have him, but if you've not, then it's okay, like find someone, like just, oh, I'm a big believer of speaking the negative. Like it
Yeah.
sounds such a it's oxymoron, like it sounds so, but there's a phrase I heard, I think it's like name it to claim it, like
Hmm.
get it out, speak the negative, get it all out your head because it never it never sounds and never feels as bad as you think it is. And even if it does feel like the worst thing you could ever think, at least, do you know what? The people around you that love you will want to know that you're going through that, because even if they don't have a solution, they can just sit with you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just the amount of times I was just like just babbling
Mhm.
and just needing that release, like just crying and be like, when you're spiraling and it's all, you're not even making sense, but you just need to get it out your body, I
Yeah.
suppose. Yeah, just do that. It sounds it sounds wrong, but that was super helpful for me.
It's how we make sense of situations that don't make sense. It's like we tell the story and we tell the story, and I suppose there's a bit of a
Mhm.
phrase in therapy sometimes when you get clients that'll come and they'll tell you the same story, the same narrative over and over again. It's like I'll often find myself thinking, right, what am I missing? What is it that they're still telling me? Because there's something in that I've not quite got. If they still
Mm.
need to keep telling the same story again, and sometimes it is just that process of like I need to say it out loud 100 times, and then that is the thing that suddenly it just you hear yourself saying it and you hear it differently in that moment. So I think I find that often I talk about that idea of like grief needs to be witnessed. It's no something we're necessarily designed to do in absolute privacy. Like sometimes we need space to just be sad on our own and have a right good cry and do the cathartic bits of grief. But there's other times where it's like it needs to be witnessed. Somebody else needs to hear what you're
Mm.
feeling. It needs to be described. It's where we get the support of, community, whatever that looks like round about us.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
definitely.
What would be, I'm obviously mindful you're a couple of years into this journey now, and obviously have been living this life for a couple of years now. So if anybody was listening to this today and thinking maybe they hadn't ever considered that no contact, or, it's something
Mm.
that maybe they've thought about but weren't really sure, have you got advice? Have you got wisdom that you would offer to somebody that's maybe in the early
Yeah,
stages of that journey?
yeah. I think no contact is like the very last step. I think, make sure you're really clear that that's the best outcome for you. There's steps that I did before it. Um, like there's a oh, what's the word? There's a not activity, but it's called grey rock method.
Okay, I heard of
So
that.
it's it's really good if you're in and it's a good wee test to see when you're around your like tricky relationships or tricky family. and you're trying not to respond, try to, if you can imagine, like you are a grey rock. So you know that way if people are just trying to get a rise out of you or trying to get a reaction, whether it's siblings or parents, and you just literally give them no emotion,
Okay.
that's a really good, I think that was a really, because I did that, obviously I'd read about, I didn't tell them I was doing that.
Mm.
Um, so that was because I found myself getting really triggered and really cut, and I was leaving like drained, and it was really affecting my energy and mindset. So I've heard this term, grey rock, and it's all about, and I suppose it's just protecting your energy and just giving them, you're still in the room, you're still having the conversation, but they're just not, you're not getting triggered as much.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and I think that was a really important stage to practice before the no contact stage, because I believe because I had done that, this is really tricky to say, but I feel like no contact was a natural progression because I wasn't supplying their demand of drama or
Mm.
action.
Mhm.
And I think that's all, if I'm honest, that is, they just, I think that was a culmination of they took a step back because I was of no use to them, really. And if I'm honest, that is, I've processed that and everything. And like I said, that's my take on it. And I think that was another element of, was it a healthy, were we having healthy interactions and relationships? No, I don't think so. And
Mm.
only because I had that sort of research evidence and stored in my
Mhm.
head. So I would recommend, like, do your own research before you go no contact. There's loads of little, like, I got really interested in like psychology and everything, and there's different terms that you can do in like, therapy and counselling terms that you can do to just test the water.
Yeah.
Maybe it is a tricky relationship, but it's worth, only you will know if it's worth putting the effort in. But if you have decided that you like no contact is best for you, um, just be gentle with yourself. It is super tricky. All the problems will not disappear overnight because they
Yeah.
are no longer in your life. There's still, just make sure you've got a really good support group around you. Make sure you're kind to yourself. Um, and be aware of your own patterns and triggers that will affect, because there's times like I have to be really super gentle with myself around Christmas because obviously I don't see them at Christmas, but I've got my own family to then have a really nice time with. But I can notice, you just have to really, really bump up your self-awareness. Like,
Mm.
just that little things that wouldn't have bothered me, like in August, really, really get to me in December. But that's because, and I feel myself being a little bit more argumentative because I don't know if that's like my safe place or I feel safe when when you can, when you're having drama and you're having arguments, it's like there's something physical there to react to.
Mhm.
And when it's not, I'm really, it just sounds really weird to say, but because of previous, I really struggle with, you know, happy occasions, like
Yeah.
the joy. And it feels really, I love Christmas, I love all parties and everything. That's the thing. You're like, I'm not I'm not a pure sad sack, but it's like joy. I really struggle with that whole, do you know that way, like really proper, warm, fuzzy inner
Mm.
joy, like gratitude. Do you know what I mean? I do try and practice it. Um, but yeah, God, I'm 5 years later and that can still catch me off guard. Um, so yeah, if you're going no contact, really great support group. Try and notice your own patterns and triggers. and how you can support yourself through that, like have a self-care practice in with that. Yeah, it's so tricky, man, because it's like just because you've removed them doesn't mean that
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not a overnight thing.
oh, it's not an overnight thing. But I think, yeah, do you know what? It is hard, but my life is 1,000 times better without them in it. And I think that's what I've always got to remind myself. And even now, I know their birthdays, all their birthdays and Christmas are ingrained in my head. And I just send them a little like, hope you're doing good today. Hope you're having a lovely day. Love you. Love them to bits. But we're just not in each other's lives.
Yeah, yeah. What a beautiful ending to our conversation. I love that idea of, your life is just, yeah, infinitely better without that
It's,
drama in
it
it.
is,
Hmm.
yeah, it is. And yeah, it is. And it's that thing, you've got to be really honest with yourself. And, if it does look different to what society tells you it should look like, then that's okay because it's your life, it's you that's got to live it at the end of the day. So, yeah.
Amazing. Stacey, thank you for trusting me with this conversation as well, because I'm really conscious and have been holding throughout this conversation that awareness of what you started with, of like this is a big deal to say some of this out loud. And I know obviously it's different talking about something that impacts on other real life people. It's different when we're maybe recounting stories of somebody who's died because they're not here to hear it. But yeah, I'm just conscious that it is a big deal for you to say this and to claim your story in it as well. So thank you
Yeah.
for
Oh, you're
trusting me
welcome.
with it.
No, so welcome, and thanks for having me on because I think it was a really important part of my journey, like, you know, reclaiming, yeah, my power back because there was so much shame and guilt and
Mm.
silence around it, and it's like, yeah. So no, thank you. I've loved it, and I didn't catch it.
I feel like if everybody gets to the end, they're like, "Well, that was all right. Actually, I didn't cry." It's like I'm welcoming the tears. Bring them on. Bring them on. Listen, if people did want to connect with you after this, Stacey, because I'm imagining that for folk listening, this might really like resonate from their experience. So if people did want to reach out, if they wanted to find out maybe as well a wee bit more about what you do in your business, how do folk get in contact with you?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, if you've got any questions, honestly, my DMs are always open. You can find me at the Superpower Coach on Instagram, and I have got a website, www.thesuperpowercoach.co.uk. Yeah, connect. You can usually get me on Instagram, the Superpower Coach, and I am actually working with women personalised one-to-one coaching to build their self-awareness because this has just been a game changer for me. And
Mm.
I do that by including some of the stuff that has helped me, like human design and EFT. We do loads of tapping. That's been really beneficial to me and my group coaching clients. And yeah, and just traditional like coaching techniques as well are just yeah, some really great stuff that we work with. But yeah, if you ever want to chat about what I've spoke about, please, you're not alone. There's loads of it out there, and you
Mm.
can definitely contact me, just even if it's for a wee chat. But yeah, you're more than welcome.
Amazing, amazing. As I always say at the end of this, if this episode has felt useful to people, if you're listening to it and there's somebody in your life that you think would benefit from it, please do consider sharing it and also make sure that you're subscribed, because that way you'll get notifications whenever we do release new episodes. Obviously, with our episodes, I always make sure that we link to my guests' details in the show notes. So, obviously, if you found today helpful and you want to connect with Stacey, all the details will be just underneath the podcast episode in the show notes at the bottom. So, yeah, again, Stacey, just to say a huge thank you for your honesty and your wisdom that you brought to today's conversation. And yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.